Hi, Amy.
Hi, Bryde.
It's nice to be here with you.
Thanks for having me in my own home.
Thanks for having me.
Sorry.
We're here to talk about I Hear You, a modern medical drama.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about what this is and what's it about?
Yeah, it's a digital series, 10 episodes, and it's stories about women being the most inclusive sort of body of anyone, femme identifying, that we can manage, and their experiences primarily with sexual health but health issues in general, but largely women's sexual health issues. It's a really under-discussed, it's a very taboo topic, and it's also a very underserved issue in the medical healthcare system, particularly in Nova Scotia, which is where the show is set, and there is direct reference to what's happening with what I would say is a medical crisis in our primary care in Nova Scotia. So it follows the journey of one brand new female family doctor and her interaction both with her patients but also with the medical system and her struggle to provide care within the Western medical system for a plethora of patients from, we have so many, let me think, the characters are 16 to 75 and everybody in between, and the things that these women are dealing with.
Are the stories real ones that you've heard from real people?
No, in the sense that all of them were completely fictionalized by me as a writer, but we did hundreds of hours of interviews of women, so they're heavily inspired by large groups of women. I mean, there was no one person that each story is sort of modeled after, but there was a ton of content that will, I think, ring true for a lot of people because it came from real stories.
It's a lot to cover in 10 episodes.
Yes.
Would you say that the stories you selected are pretty representative of the full range of things that you heard in conversations, or is there anything that you've had to cut out because just for sake of time?
So many. With the first beat board that we had of storyboard ideas was an entire wall of 5-inch by 5-inch sticky notes of everything that we could possibly think of or that we possibly heard of, and then we had to pick 10 of those. I mean, I feel like I have 5 seasons worth of episodes ready to go in the can, and some of the things we picked were ones that we heard repeated. That was really common. This common frustration of this thing of I'm not being heard on this topic, and I know that it's common. I know other women have this problem, and then some of them are much more specific. That there's a hiddenness to that because it doesn't maybe affect a huge demographic of women, but it affects the ones that are impacted by it really deeply. So tried to find a balance between things that I felt like would hit the majority of sort of issues that women are having and the ones that just seem to not be getting talked about, like trans health or non-binary healthcare.
What have been some of the responses you've received from people when you tell them what you're doing?
I always say this, and it has held true to date, that I have not told anyone about the show and not had them respond with a story of their own that has directly impacted them, either because of their own health or somebody that they know, and always in a really giving way, where it's not just like a quick, oh yeah, I kind of identify with that, or like, oh, I had issues one time. I was in a grocery store and it was a kind of quiet day, I guess, and I don't even know why the teller and I started talking about it, but I ended up standing there for 35 minutes talking to her about her endometriosis because she needed somebody to talk to about it. And I feel like that's the response I constantly get, that I'm now aware when I bring the show up, I need to have time to talk about it, which is great. That's the response you hope you're going to have.
So what are some of the subjects that you are tackling in the episodes?
So we're looking at sexual intimacy amongst senior citizens and the rise of STDs.
Cool.
We are looking at the use of hormonal birth control amongst youth to control things outside of their actual menstruation, so acne, PMS symptoms, things like that, and body autonomy and choice with young people, having their voice heard. We are talking about trans women healthcare. We are talking about non-binary and queer healthcare. Lots around both the choice to be a mother and maternal healthcare and problems that arise like postpartum depression, but also the choice to not be a mother and the ability for women to have access to things like tubal ligation and abortions. and everything in between.
Yeah.
Lots of pelvic pain as well. We're dealing with a number of cases with vaginal pain or chronic pelvic pain, which is also, I feel like an entire series could be done just on women's chronic pain in a sexual health context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you navigating the balance of like, well, you're the writer and the creator and also the lead,
Yes.
A through line consistent character. How have you balanced the challenges of telling stories with making sure we've got some scientific, you know, factual information about the reality of these conditions or situations for people?
Yeah. I don't write in a bubble or work in a bubble. I have a huge team of people that are helping me. And as far as the script development goes, the big one was my show co-creators and then my script editors. So we had a women's sexual health expert from Vancouver, Siri Bright, who went through, I want to say 30 drafts of the script with me. And then an OBGYN from Toronto, Alicia Orstrom, who also went through the same 30 drafts of the script. And so every time anything gets changed or we're working on some new development or treatment that maybe is going to be included in there, always talking to somebody from both Eastern and Western side, which is a common theme that runs through the doctor's life in the show, is that she's battling with her own beliefs in the Western medical system and how what we perceive as alternative therapies maybe can be included in her practice. So I made sure I had those voices in the creation process.
Do you feel, or how do you feel this might be received by your audiences?
I'm not sure. I hope that it's received in any way, whether positive or negative, but that drives conversation. I think that's my biggest hope, is that however it lands on people, that it just makes them want to talk about it, whether they're angry, whether they're hurt, whether they're sad, whether they are relieved to have a space to see somebody that they feel themselves reflected in. I just want them to be able to talk about this. Yeah.
I would anticipate that there's going to be a huge wave of response to this with talking about things that aren't part of the common narrative. The people like the cashier that you were talking about, it's like people need an outlet. And why do you think that is so important right now?
I think it's important because the door's been opened, that there's a feeling that women have that we're allowed to maybe start talking about things that the rest of society finds uncomfortable. And that started with the Me Too movement, and that definitely had an influence in feeling that this was a time where this show would be received. But I think the reason that it's important to talk about it now is just because it hasn't been done before. It should have been. We should have talked about this already. I got asked to submit examples of other shows that were like this when I was doing part of the development process, and we could not find any. Yes, there's medical shows, of course, but we couldn't find anything really, even in the documentary world, that really talked about women's sexual health. And so I think that's why it's so important to talk about now, is we're just really long overdue on it. And I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why it's been, no, that's not true. I do. It's hard. It's really hard. It's a really vulnerable space to walk into. And I feel fear, I think is the right word, every day at how this is going to be received, because I feel like I've picked 10 topics that are all really potentially controversial or volatile, and basically opened myself and my world up to the rest of the world to say, let's have a conversation about this. And that's a really scary thing to do.
Yeah, because you are now a spokesperson.
Yeah. And I don't have a background in women's health. I don't have a background in medicine. There's a lot of stuff I absolutely do not know, even about the conditions I'm talking about in the show, even though I did as much research and interviews and stuff as possible. I'm not an expert on this. I'm just another woman who would really like to talk to somebody about it, and I'd like to hear their story, and I'd like to share my own maybe someday, but I haven't even done that. I always reference why did you do this show? Well, because I have my own medical reasons. But it feels really scary to put that out there, and I want a space for myself to feel like it's safe for me to do that. Yeah.
How do you feel about that role of being the point person for the conversations that you're about to start? Or do you think that's going to happen?
I've been told that I need to be prepared for that. I feel an immense sense of responsibility, I think increasingly so. When I started, I felt a responsibility to tell these stories, you know, as well as I could, which feels like a constant wall I'm hitting up against, that my ability as an artist does not meet my desire to tell these stories the way that I think they should be told. And I think I feel that same sense of inadequacy as a spokesperson, that I just feel like I'm not going to be good enough at this, but I will give it my everything. Yeah.
Why did you choose to do it as more of a narrative as opposed to documentary style?
That's a really good question, because I feel like narratives can impact people in a way that documentaries don't. People get caught up in the characters and these stories that they feel some connection to, but that don't hit so close to home that it feels uncomfortable. That there's this like beautiful shiny barrier between us and narrative. And in documentaries that's stripped away, and it's intentionally stripped away, and it's you know, it tends to be really punchy and really impacting. But I hope that the feeling that I have when I watch a film or a TV show that like really gets me, that like I just feel so much towards, I hope to be able to create that, and through that then have a conversation about what's really happening in the real world. That the dramatization of something can help people find comfort in discussing it, that it's a bit easier to discuss it because it's not real life, it's a TV show, so you can talk about like, oh, those characters that did that on that episode last night, without having to really open yourself up to the real world. So it feels like a bit of a wider range of accessing an audience.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. I feel like people, while you were saying that, I was imagining watching it here in the comfort of your own home and being like, that's my living room.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to share with anybody listening about what's about to be launched into reality and existence?
That I hope people find a connection with it that's beyond just the world, that whatever it is that they're living with or living in, that I hope this creates community. You know, I said that I wanted it to create conversation, and that's true, but you need more than one person to have a conversation, and maybe what I am really hoping is that it creates a community, multiple platforms of communities for people to be able to talk about this, and to really erase some of that taboo feeling that we have, that, you know, we have to be hush-hush and we have to sort of suffer in silence. And that I really hope that this show is a challenge to not just the province of Nova Scotia, but I would say Canada as a country, to start to look at our primary health care and the way that we treat both our primary care physicians and the patients who desperately need those resources. That there is a political message behind this show. I'm not, you know, this is not a non-biased, like, let's just put it out there and people can take what they want from it. I feel really strongly about the fact that we need to do better, and we need to do better specifically for women. It's a massive issue, so I think that's what I would like people to know.
So for anybody watching this who wants to join that community and like be a part of those conversations, where are those platforms that people can find this?
So we are online. We have a website, I Hear You series. We've got Facebook, I Hear You. We will have a blog, a podcast, the I Hear You podcast. We're on Instagram, and basically all of our handles and hashtags are all around I Hear You series or I Hear You. And we would love for people to come and find us and come to our live podcast tapings, and come and check out all the behind the scene sort of footage that we'll have, which is going to be, I think, some of the most interesting stuff that goes with the show is those conversations with the actors and the crew and people who are really invested in this topic.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks
so much.
Let's do it. Yay!